Hello, my name is Keith Elliott. Welcome to FlipAgain Development with React. This is episode number 7. We are thinking in React with Redwood Router. Again, we began this last episode where we stepped through the Thinking in React article from the React website with Redwood routing in mind, or routing in general. We created a mock. We defined the component hierarchy. We thought through the URL parameters, the URL, what it will look like, and the parameters that we will use to send from the URL. The user can define a certain state via the URL, and these parameters, like username, topic, and index +1, can be sent into the app through the pages into the component to allow us to control the behavior of the app. And so in step 2, where we build a static version, we incorporated the URL parameters. The theme here is build an app that renders the data model using other components and passing data as props. Props are a way of passing data from parent to child. So in my mind, URL parameters are a lot like props. So we've incorporated them into the basic thinking of our app. So let's go back to the code and make a little progress. We left off by observing that our app, which is super basic at the moment, but that's okay. Yeah, it's got to start somewhere. We had an error, a certain error where we saw that the URL that is created dynamically in the link component is adding a string to another string to create, it's incorrectly adding or squishing two strings together, concatenating two strings via the plus operator. Because the index +1 parameter that we were passing in from the URL, this number 2 right here, was not, in fact, a number, it was a string. So if I hover over the next link and look down at the bottom over here, you can see that the dynamically created link points to 21. It should be 3. So what do we do about this? Let's pop over to the Redwood site. So if we go to redwoodjs.com and then make our way to the docs, over on the left, we find Redwood Router information, all kinds of good stuff regarding the router. And we've talked a lot about this in the prior episode. But let's make our way down to routing parameters. We've already defined a batch of them in our app. And let's make our way to route parameter types. So check this out. We can specify that certain parameters are, for example, an integer. And by adding int onto the parameter, we're telling Redwood Router only to match digits, and then use number to convert the parameter into a number. Now, instead of a string being sent to the page, a number will be sent, which sounds great. I think this will simply solve our problem. I just tested it, and it does. So let me show you. So what we do is we add a suffix, colon, and then the int word or keyword to it. I will save this, hop back over to our app, refresh it, and now if I hover over on the bottom left of the screen here, we see that instead of 21 being dynamically created by concatenating a 2 and a 1, we are in fact adding a 2 and a 1 to get 3. So voila, it worked. So that was a fun little benefit of Redwood handling the say, conversion from a string to an integer on our behalf. Okay, cool. So let's now move on to, let's think through the app and decide what to do next. There are a couple things that come to mind as I was looking at this code. A couple, call it cleanup items that we could do. Number one, if you recall, our flashcard app component will be where we grab the data and, upon success, send the data of interest to the flashcard component. We may, in fact, come upon an error or an empty batch of data, and we will emulate the Redwood cells style and define a success case, an empty case, a failure case, etc. And so we're going to just keep building this out right now. One of the things we did is I passed to the success case the flashcard list length. I also passed the flashcards. So this is the data that we will have. One of the concepts in thinking in React is we can or should also calculate data where appropriate and not, and I would say calculate it right before you need it. Calculated data is not necessarily state. If you can calculate it, let's calculate it. And it's somewhere in the doc, the year that I read that. So it sounds like good advice. In this case, we do need to calculate the flashcard list length, but we do not need to do it here because we don't, we still will have access to the whole array. So let's pop up here to the success component, and I will zap the flashcard list length from there. And here where we need it, this is where we will calculate it. Then I will simply grab it as from via the length property of the array. So just a little cleanup there. And let's make sure it works. Our app still works. Another obvious thing that needs to be updated is the index +1 parameter here will be used to grab the appropriate flashcard from, call it the stack of flashcards, say a figurative stack. It's a human readable concept, starting with 1, and so if I have a stack of 15 things, I want to show which, say, number in the stack. I want to show where I am in the stack via this number. And so this will need to be converted, this number where I am, which we called index +1. We will simply need to convert it to JavaScript array index, which is 0 base. So I'll simply subtract 1 from it. So once I do that, then if I refresh this, then I can actually see the contents changing. So if I'm at the first item, there's no previous button because I'm at the beginning. There's a next button. I can click it, and we can see that the content changes. So I can pop through the flashcards. Alrighty. So that seems fine. I want to take the opportunity, if to do a little, say, defensive programming. If I enter a big number, it's going to crater. So let's fix that. Let's fix that. So I would propose that we simply have a function that checks to see that the index +1 property is within a reasonable range, and if it's not, just set it to, say, 1. I think that's a good and reasonable behavior. I don't necessarily need to crater the app if this index is not correct. So let's just knock this out. So let's see, const, I'll create a helper function. Let's call it a verify index plus 1. And we will take the value. We will also need the flashcard list length. And let's see, if the index plus 1 is, let's see, it will be an integer. I suppose it could be negative. I haven't tested, but maybe it can be negative. So if it's equal, say less than or equal to 0. I don't want, 0 in terms of an index will work, but again, this is index plus 1, so it has to be 1 or greater. So if it's less than that, then we need to adjust it. And then if it's greater, so if it's less than or equal to 0, or if index plus 1 is greater in the flashcard list length, then let's return a default. Let's say that default index plus 1. Else we can return index plus 1. All right. I think this ought to work. Let's define our default here. As 1. And let's simply wrap this guy with this verify index plus 1 helper function. And I suppose we should do that here too. So if somebody sends in 300 and that's not legit, it will kind of turn it into 1 and send that to the flashcard. Okay, so I think through it, it ought to work. I'm a fan of thinking through the code and the behavior of the app prior to looking at it. And we have a nice big failure. Okay, what did I do? Well, one thing I did is I didn't define, messed up my syntax. We'll use the arrow function syntax here for the function. Let's see if that did it. And we have a new error, so that worked. Let's see here. Cannot read property of front of undefined. All right. So let's think through that. And this is a good example where I really need to make the leap to TypeScript, because I was simply missing an input parameter. Flashcard list length. So the success case, again, I don't have that, so we'll just grab it off the array. Okay. So now these two guys exist. All right, so let's go look, and I refresh, and it, if I enter 300 here, it does not crater, and in fact it shows the first flashcard, which is welcome to FlipAgain. So I can click next and click through. Okay, so let's get rid of this guy. We don't need the little placeholder that's on the page. So our flashcard page simply includes the flashcard app, which again is analogous to a flashcard, say cell, a Redwood cell in style. The URL parameters are provided via Redwood Router to the page, and we pass those on through. I no longer need that import. Let's pop over to the app. And so we've worked through the say an incorrect index. So 0 is not correct, but it sends us to 1. 1 is still 1. 2 works as well. Okay, so as we think through where we are, I'm pondering what's next in terms of wearing out props and also wearing out the URL parameters. As we look at the app, obviously we need to implement this flipped back button. We can do that. That feels like state to me, so we will do that in a moment. But in the super basic version, I think that's it. I think we've, say, worn out the props, worn out the URL parameters, and it's time to move on to state. So let's do that. Step 3, identify the minimal but complete representation of UI state. We will need to make it interactive, and we can achieve this with state. There are a couple key themes, namely, are you sure it needs to be state? If it's passed in from a parent via props, it probably isn't state. Does it remain unchanged over time? If so, it's probably not state. Can it be based? Can it be computed? That's what I was saying earlier. Or based on other props? If so, it isn't state. So I think we're good. And determining what's state. And then we need to think about where state should live. So let's first ponder a simple example. The state associated with hitting this button and flipping the flashcard over. So let's pop back over to the app. I don't think it needs to live here where we call the flashcard component. I would propose that the state, whether it's showing the front or the back, live within the flashcard. We potentially could add it, we could even add it to the URL parameter and show something like front or back. That's probably reasonable. Or just not. Everything, we don't always need to define everything in the URL in terms of capturing the state. And in my mind, the app can control some of the state. The user may not have the ability to, say, preserve state in total. And so in this case, in my mind, if the flashcard is accessed, I will just assume or define that the flashcard starts at the front, and you got to click the button to see the back. So I'll roll with that concept. So in that case, I think the flashcard ought to hold the state So let's pop over to the flashcard. And within the flashcard function component, we will define a new state variable. And let's call it is showing front. And we will start with a default of true. All right. Let's put these to use. So right now, let's see if within the curly braces here is showing front. We'll use the ternary operator. If, or it's one question mark, not two. If it's showing front, then show the front. Otherwise, we will show the back. So that works with the default. It doesn't yet do anything because we don't change it, but I can go here and got to import the state. Control space and auto import. Voila. All right, so it didn't do anything. I still need to implement this button. So the button, when we click the button, we can say on click, we send it a function. We do not execute the function, we send it a function. And that function can be is, or set rather, set is showing front. And we will set that to the opposite of what it currently is showing front. Okay, so the state will live in the flashcard app. As a default, the state variable is showing front. Upon clicking this button, we run the set is showing front state updater function, sending it the opposite of what it currently is. And when that happens, the anytime state or props change, the component is re-rendered by React on our behalf, and it should just flip. It should change from showing the front to the back. So if I thought through everything appropriately, it should just work. So here we are. Let's hit the button, and ta-da! It worked. What fun. Good deal. Welcome to FlipAgain. Click flip to flip. Flipped. Click next and preve to move. So next. So here's something a little quirky. As I click back, if I'm looking at the back and then I click, it's still looking at the back. I want it to look at the front. In my mind, when I go to a new flashcard, I should be looking at the front. So let's implement that. To do that, let's use the use effect hook, which takes a callback as the first parameter, and the callback is executed when the items in the array that is passed in as the second parameter change. So in this case, if the index plus 1 changes, that is, I'm changing to a new flashcard, then I want to make sure that the set is showing, or is showing front state variable is set to true. So I'll simply call is showing front and pass it true. So this is the use effect hook. It was auto imported. We pass it a callback, which is executed when the items in the array that's passed in as the second parameter or argument in this function change. So if all goes well now, if I save this, let's go back to the front. So here I am looking at the front. This is the back. If I click next, I guess you need to know what the second one what the front of the second one says. The front of the second one says click, add, edit, remove to create your own. So it is. It does say that. If I flipped it back, it's a tool to help you learn new things. So now I'm looking at the back. If I go to the previous, it's showing now the front, because the front of the first is welcome to FlipAgain, and the back is flipped. So now I can go back here and see the front, flip, flip, etc. Okay, cool. Alrighty. Okay. I think we are cooking. What else? What else? What other state items can we add in this simple beginning? Let's see. And do we need to add inverse data flow? For this initial functionality of given where we grab, say, some example data and simply step through it, showing next and previous, I don't think we need to do much more. There's another thing on my mind, though. The items passed in the URL need to be handled to account for spaces or special characters. They will be encoded. Like, for example, I do have a topic called addition practice. And the, addition practice. So the thoughtful among us will say that this may not work as expected if you didn't appropriately consider the space. It turns out Google Chrome will convert that space to a %20, which is what spaces are converted to in URLs. So this %20 represents a space. So it's encoded. It is encoding the URL. And I've observed that Redwood Router doesn't decode it on our behalf, which is fine, but we need to decode it, because in this case I do have in the default flashcards a couple items called addition practice, a couple flashcards with the topic of addition practice, and there is a space here. I wanted to make sure I can handle spaces appropriately. So let's do that. So what we're seeing is that it's not finding this. It should find it. There are two of them. If I pass in a 1 here, it should show me the first one, but it's not. It can't find it. And it's throwing a big ugly error. So let's go handle that. To do that, ultimately, here in the app, in the get flashcard data, I'm comparing the flashcard topics when I'm filtering the default flashcards down to a topic. So this topic right here is encoded. It's addition %20 topic or practice. And I'll have to think through it, but one way we could fix this is to decode it right here using the decode URL parameter, something like that. Let's go look. No, what is it? Decode URL, decode URI component. So there's a decode URI component function built into JavaScript, and it gets the unencoded version of the encoded component of a uniform resource identifier. There is a decode URI, just plain Jane decode URI, gets the unencoded version of an encoded uniform resource identifier. I think they're saying the same thing. I don't quite know the difference, but I've been in the habit of using this one, so I will use this one. So now if I pass in addition practice, Chrome converts the space to a %20. That topic will make its way all the way to here where I get the data. And I need to then decode it. So it's just addition practice with the plain space. And it should then return the data of interest. So I think it should work, and it did. So if I refresh, I see the flashcard contents, the front and the back. Okay, so that tightened that up a bit. Let's look at the second one. If I click next here, that works. That works. We could encode it. So I'm pondering, as we create these links, do I need to encode it? If you look at the bottom of the screen, addition practice here has a space in it. I didn't encode it in the link definition. So if let's pop back over to the flashcard component. Right here, the link is dynamically created via the link component, and it's not encoding it. In this case, Chrome is handling it appropriately. But I think it may be a Chrome thing. I don't know if we should trust that all browsers will handle spaces in the URL appropriately. So I would say let's encode URI component. Which is the sister function of decode. You need to make sure that you don't double encode. You can always decode and decode multiple times, but you cannot do the opposite because you'll end up with a bunch of crazy characters. And so my thinking with encoding is encode right before you need it to be encoded. That's my general concept. So this topic should be well, I would say it needs to find its way here unencoded, and then we will encode it. I'll have to follow the trail of this topic and make sure that is the case. So we will also encode this one. Okay, so now I will save it. If we go back and look at the URL, instead of a space in addition practice, there should be a %20 in between the two. And it doesn't show it on the URL. So I don't know if it's just not, if it's making it human readable on our behalf. It is up here in the address bar. We have addition practice 2, and it converts it to %20 for us. So it's still working, and yeah, so it's working. I think we are good. I may keep thinking through this, just to think through the gotchas with the concept of keeping the code pretty tight and robust as we go, and not leaving a trail of loose ends to clean up later. So it looks like it's fine. We will have, if I enter a bogus URL, it's got a page not found that's not too pretty. We'll have to clean that up. Or even if there's a topic, we still need to implement the empty. So if I have, subtraction practice as a topic, instead of showing a nice, there is no topic with the name of subtraction practice, it shows this big mean error. So we can fix that too. But for now, we're going to wrap. I think this is a good spot in terms of the concept of Redwood Router and how it fits into the theme of thinking in React. I think we've done it called the one-way data flow scheme. We added just a little bit of state. The state being flipping a flashcard over. That was pretty cool. Got us using the use effect hook, which is cool. And then as well, we thought through encoding and decoding the URL parameters. So where the encoded data is needed, we decode it to get it in the shape that we expect before we, say, process the data. So some good basic concepts. So I think it's a good spot to pause for now, and as we proceed, I will take us to the edit, add, and remove buttons. We also have info here that we can show. In fact, I can't help it. It's not going to be pretty, but let me just knock that out real quick. So below my buttons, let's go ahead and add topic, flashcard.topic. There we go. So intro in the mock showed a comma and then the number. So comma, and then let's look at index +1 out of flashcard list length total. Voila. So intro 2 of 9. Intro 3 of 9. Okay, that was easy enough. Alrighty. Cool. Okay. So this, and then there's a silly obvious thing. I need to make this pretty. The mockup is prettier. I think making it pretty will be a constant task for me for sure. But we have some core functionality. We have the basic flashcard content. I didn't put these. It's another thing I can do is I can pull everything out and put it in, I would call it little helper components. But for now, it's not too ugly being wrapped up here. And so I could do that. I could obviously then create the additional functionality, edit, add, remove, and then make it pretty, and then add some testing, etc. So anyway, that's what's on my mind. And let's wrap now. Thanks for joining me. I'll look forward to, I'll think through it and we'll figure out where to go next as we create a tool that hopefully will be useful for you, my friend. I'm scratching my own itch, so I'll at least make it useful for me. So hopefully it'll be a good thing for the world, and have a great day. I'll talk to you later.